Okay, so originally I was gonna put this in my sci-fi fantasy news video, but it turned out there was just way too much The Witcher news. So this video, I'm gonna talk about the showrunner for Netflix's The Witcher, Lauren Hissrich, and what she had to say about not only season 1, but season 2 and what we can expect, because it's a lot of exciting stuff. So first, I just want to go over Lauren once more assuring us that season 2 is going to be much more linear and just talking about its structure in general, because I know that really messed with a lot of people and they didn't like it. So here's what Lauren had to say on that. All 3 characters, Geralt, Ciri, and Yennefer, are on the same timeline now. That's where we ended season 1. That's absolutely where we will pick up in season 2. The stories will be told in a much more linear fashion. They won't all be one story. It's not like all 3 are together and happy all the time. But I do want to employ some different ways to look at time series-wise. I think that there is a lot that we couldn't fit in season 1. There are different short stories that I would love to highlight and focus on. We may end up doing those in the future via flashback, for instance. But no, we won't have things across 100 years in the same time anymore. So kind of what she's talking about, one, you guys already know because I talked about quite a bit, that people didn't like how much we jumped around in time. We essentially had 3 different time periods and it just was all over the place. Primary time periods, because someone's gonna decide to be, you know what the internet is usually like. But what she's also talking about, there are some short stories in the prequel books, the 2 prequel books to the main Witcher saga, where Geralt hasn't met Ciri yet, and he has some little adventures, and she didn't get to adapt those in season 1, so she's more so talking, okay, I still want to do some of these short stories before Geralt and Ciri are together, but it would have to be done via a flashback, so that might happen, but she's gonna make it more obvious when it's a flashback. It just won't be jumping around and people go, wait, what just happened? For example, if you've read any of the Witcher comics, you know that sometimes Geralt is talking to Ciri and then he does a flashback to a monster he encountered. So I would imagine she might do something like that. Ciri and Geralt are talking and Geralt tells her a story of a monster he once encountered and it's done as a little flashback thing. Lauren also addressed the criticism that she shoved too much in season 1 and she could have made it a lot more logical, and she was hurt a bit about that criticism, so here's what she had to say on that in a recent interview. It's one of the broadest ones, but it's one of the ones that hurt the most when I read it. Some people feel that because we were putting in so much story and because it was very important to me to present Yennefer early on, they felt like they didn't get to go deep enough into any of the characters. They were trying to follow so much story that none of the stories emotionally resonated. Not everyone feels that way, but I heard that critique enough for it to sit with me. Which I think is interesting because I do feel like quite a few of the stories resonated with me, so I'm interested from the perspective of people that felt like they couldn't get attached or emotionally invested in any of the characters, Geralt, Ciri, or Yennefer mainly, because there was too much story. So if you're one of those people, tell me in the comment section down below why that was such a problem for you and why you couldn't emotionally attach to those characters. Lauren continued on talking about how they are shortening the script. So I talked about Lauren in another interview she did, how she admitted a mistake they made was writing these very long scripts, so they ended up cutting out quite a bit. And one of the big changes she's making for season 2 is much shorter scripts, and she touched on that again. So here's what Lauren said. We already know the stories we're telling for season 2, but I want to make sure that we have the time to tell them appropriately. One of the biggest changes we've made is to make sure that the scripts aren't too long. It's a terrible thing when you shoot a story that you're proud of, and then it's 95 minutes long, and you're trying to fit it into 60 minutes of television. You end up cutting stuff that you know would be great, or would be important. Viewers are going to find that because we're not trying to push as much story, and we're not trying to constantly introduce new characters all the time, and new worlds, and new kingdoms, and increase the politics. Sometimes we just get to sit with characters and learn about them a little more. That's probably the thing I'm most excited for people to see. I'm not sure why she couldn't have talked to Netflix into just letting it be 95 minutes long. I feel like that would have been a win for everyone, but I understand that she was given constraints and she has to abide by them. Lauren also had to justify her spending so much time with Yennefer, so you know if you've read the books, we don't get Yennefer's early life. We get little blurbs that hint to her earlier life, but we don't get as much as what we got in the first season of the Netflix series. And for some reason, people have wanted Lauren to justify doing that, and so she actually, in an interview, had to be like, this is why I focused on Yennefer so much. So here's what she said on that. When I first pitched The Witcher to Netflix, I talked about how important it was to me to explore the women of the series in the same detailed layer way as the men. A rising tide lifts all the boats, you know. Strong characters beget more strong characters, beget better stories, beget a more expansive universe. Specifically, I wanted to meet Yennefer as a young woman, to see that circumstances and experiences that built her into the tough, private, independent sorceress that we know and love from the books. The author, Andrzej Sapkowski, had planted small moments, flashbacks, thoughts in the books, glimpses into Yennefer's younger life. But as a reader, what I was left to wonder was why Yen had tried to once kill herself in Aretuza, or how she grappled with the idea of a total physical transformation. Those were the most important scenes to me, and the other writers, the why-how scenes. So we spent days in the writer's room debating how Yennefer felt about becoming beautiful, her conflict over the decision to change her appearance, her knowledge that it could influence her power and her station, her seeming sureness about what she'd have to lose, and her unexpected realization that she had a strong backbone all along. We dug around the void left in Yennefer by her abusive family, and wondered whether she and her mentor Tissaia would grow and shift in both painful and good ways to eventually become family to each other. And we debated how Yennefer had met Estrid years prior to the Shard of Ice story. Specifically, what she needed from him and what he gave her, and how that on-again, off-again love could complicate her force of nature relationship with Geralt. I love these layers that we pulled from the books and then expounded upon. Interestingly, she also confirmed that we're going to get more Fringilla in season 2. So Lauren said, "You will absolutely get more Fringilla. What is interesting, referring back to your earlier question, Fringilla is one of these characters that we're going to delve into even more. One of the things that I did hear is that she seems like a fanatic or a zealot, which is interesting. I've never seen her that way, perhaps because even by the time that we're putting it on the air, I knew where we were going with season 2. We're digging deeper into her past and how she ended up at Nilfgaard, who she is as a person, and how she and Yennefer ended up on such different paths. She gets to do a lot more. I'm so excited. Mimi did a fantastic job portraying her." See, that is where I do disagree with Lauren, and I agree with, I feel like more of the vocal, I don't know if it's a majority or minority, honestly. I don't know how many people agree with this, but I feel like Fringilla definitely came across as simply a fanatic, and there wasn't a lot of deeper layers to her, so I'm interested what is going to happen with her character in season 2, and if they're going to stop making the Nilfgaardians so fanatical zealots, because that's not how they are in the books. So I guess I'm interested in her justification for making them seem very one note, because they definitely aren't in other lore. Talking about changing up lore, she also talked about Jaskier, who's called Dandelion in the books. He's called Jaskier before the translation. We just translated it to Dandelion in the English version. So if you're wondering, if you listen to some lore videos and they're saying Dandelion, that's just how English readers for the longest time were introduced to his character and what he was called, but Jaskier is what they decided to go with, his original name in the Netflix series. So she did change him around a bit, and here's what she had to say on Jaskier. "This is something that Jaskier actor Joey Beatty and I spoke a lot about. How do we take a character who loves women and not play him as a womanizer? We didn't want to play him as someone who's just trolling around, taking advantage of helpless women. The solution was to not surround him with a bunch of helpless women who are standing around waiting to be taken advantage of." Now, I know a big complaint in certain sci-fi fantasy shows has been sexual violence towards women, and there definitely is more sexual violence and taking advantage of women in the books that they cut, and specifically from Jaskier. So it's interesting that they purposely decided to take that route with him. So here's the last little bit she said about Jaskier in season 1. "So as soon as you up the strength of female characters in the show, then you will immediately up the strength of the male characters as well. This is something that is so misunderstood. Many think that if you have strong female characters, then obviously the men are weak. No. It makes men stronger too. Jaskier loves people. He loves women especially, but what he loves is women who love him as well. It was easy for Joey to portray. Joey is someone who has a lot of natural joy in life. That's what we tapped into for the character. What I love about this decision the most is that it's taken away this idea of a sleazy, womanizing guy and made him into someone that you root for. You root for him to find his true love, if that's what he's looking for. Kind of going along with what she said, I've had a big complaint where a lot of times modern filmmakers or people making television shows think, okay, in order to make women stronger, we have to make men more pathetic or weaker, and I just don't understand that. I don't understand why the woman has to be so much smarter and better than this fucking pathetic man. I like it when both sides are just equal and they both have their own strengths in different ways and their own weaknesses in other ways, and you don't have to elevate one sex by trampling on another. I just never understood that. Men and women can be strong in their own ways. Men and women can be weak in their own ways. It's okay. Lastly, Lauren talked about some deleted scenes from season 1, and I'm actually kind of disappointed we didn't get them. So on some of the deleted scenes, here's what she said. We had a lovely scene in episode 3 where Yennefer, Fringilla, and Sabrina all discussed how they felt about their transformations, and looking back, I wish we could have kept it. It was such a gorgeous example of female friendship, and it also would have served to ground Fringilla a bit more before she joined Nilfgaard. We also filmed a scene of Yen meeting a very young Triss, who just arrived at Aretuza. It served to show how far Yennefer had come in her years at Aretuza, and created a sense of mentorship between the two sorceresses. Looking ahead at some of the stories unfolding in season 2, I wish we still had those scenes, but I'm proud of what we accomplished in the time we had. Triss and Yennefer have a fun relationship, and I don't know if they're going to make Triss similar to how she is in the books, especially with Geralt. So I'd be intrigued. I have a feeling they're not. I have a feeling there's going to be no weird kind of relationship between Geralt and Triss because they've already changed her so much. So there you go, there's some latest Witcher news. Like, subscribe, and let me know what you are most looking forward to in Netflix's The Witcher Season 2.